Hey guys, welcome back. I'm filling in for Craig today, and today we're going to be doing cylinder heads on an M156. I was getting ready to put the cylinder heads on this yesterday sometime, and I realized we've never done a video with the factory upgraded style head bolts. They've always been with the head studs. We've been doing, for whatever reason, everyone's been planning on adding boost or just want to do head studs on all the engine builds we've done so far recently. So I decided, hey, this is a good time to show the procedure because it's completely different to do the factory upgraded head bolts. So without further ado, let's get started. All right guys, so we're getting started here. I already have the heads off and everything cleaned up. Pistons are cleaned up all nice. I wasn't really planning on filming this, so I had some of the parts already opened up before I decided to make a video. So before we get started, I'm going to grab our bore scope over here and show you what we're dealing with. So it's not a huge deal for me this time. I've had this engine out. It's been flipped over on the stand. Everything's had time to dry out. But if you are doing the head bolts with the engine in the car, you definitely want to make sure that these threads are nice and dry for the bolt to go in. So if you look at my bore scope here, you'll see that all of the holes that the head bolts go in are nice and dry. Now there is a little bit of carbon buildup in there, which is normal, a little bit of corrosion because it is covered in coolant normally. But the biggest thing is you want to make sure there's no coolant in there, no moisture, because what will happen is that hole will be full of water or coolant, and you go to put that head bolt in there and torque it down, and the coolant can't go anywhere. You can't compress a liquid, and it's going to crack the block. So it's very important that all these are dry. And what I like to do is I like to grab an old head bolt, and I will clean up the threads. That way I'll just use this head bolt. I'll run it down there with my fingers. If it's a little bit tight, I'll get a ratchet on there and it'll help break up the carbonates in there, and I'll blow it all out with an air gun. And you can see on this head bolt here, there's the stains from all the corrosion, all that there. That's from the coolant, and that's what we're going to clean out of the bore. It's in the block. So I took all the corrosion off of this, and I'm just gonna put in every single bore by hand. I'll use a ratchet if I have to, if there is a little bit of corrosion and carbon on there. And I'll just run this through there a few times to clean it up, blow it out with an air gun, and then we will continue. So let's come over here, and so we'll go ahead and put this first one in, thread it in, and see if it goes in nice and easy. And then we'll just go ahead and inspect all of these with the camera once we're done. This one feels like it's going in nice and smooth. And if you notice, we're going to try a little bit different way of filming today. We usually just stick everything on a tripod because we're filming by ourselves, but we hired a new helper here, and after a few days of working, he decided to disclose some information that he has some experience filming. So we're going to try it out today. If you like the difference, have him follow me around. If you think we should do it like this from now on, let us know in the comments. And the best part about having someone holding a camera is basically just live action. He can follow me around like this. So if I need to go somewhere, he can follow me, pull me up, you know, bounce back and forth. You can see everything I'm doing. And if you notice, there's a red mark on my forehead here where right before we started filming, I was trying to get a fuse out of an old car that was melted, and the pliers came up and bumped me in the head. But luckily, there is a mark there, and I think I'm gonna throw a Harry Potter costume party at my house this weekend. And I have a pretty good chance of blending in there. But if you think this is also hilarious, you can leave that in the comments as well. But let's keep going on the engine here. These are all going in pretty smoothly, but I'm sure I'll run into one or two that need a little extra love. But like I said, if you're doing this in the car, you know, just draining the coolant is not enough. You really need to get a tube in there with like a vacuum fluid extractor and suck that dry, and just to make sure everything is bone dry before you even attempt to put any head studs or head bolts or anything in here. But luckily this engine was completely taken out of the car. I had it flipped upside down, draining overnight, so I don't have to worry about that. But this one's going in a little rough. It still goes in by hand though. So a little bit of resistance isn't a big deal, but I do want to feel that bottom out. So I'm gonna get my ratchet over here. Make sure that bottoms out. And we'll blow that out with air once we get done all of them. All right, now we can go ahead and just blow some air in there. I'm sure that's great on the ears for Anthony to listen to with his headphones on while he's editing.
You're playing too loud.
All right, and now let's take a look and see how everything's looking. So Nice and clean there. Nice and clean there. A little bit of carbon down the bottom of that one. I think I might actually spray a little brake clean in there and clean that one up a little bit better. But we really just want to make sure there's no coolant and nothing that's going to affect our torque whenever we first initially torque down there. So you can see there's a little bit of dampness in this one. That's not really a big deal. You're really just making sure there's no liquid puddling up at the bottom. These are all looking pretty good. I think I am just going to spray a little bit of brake clean in that one hole just to get all that carbon out of the bottom, and we'll move over to the other side. Alright, so we'll go ahead and spray a little brake clean in there. I think I saw a little bit of junk down in this one too, so we'll spray that in there, let it sit for a few minutes, blow it out with air, and then I think I'll just run the head bolt down through those again and we'll be good to go. And then we'll move on to the other side, and then next step is to get the heads on here. And whenever you blow brake clean in here and you blow it out, definitely check with the camera for the adjacent holes in case any of that liquid ran down sitting in one of the other holes. But I'm going to double check them all with the camera anyway after I run the head bolts back down through here. And this is probably overkill, but the engine's out of the car. It's as dry as it possibly can be. So I'm going to take advantage of that and try to get these nice and clean. Typically there's not a whole lot of corrosion you have to deal with, but this car had the old style head bolts in it, and a few of these were actually broken. So that's why so much coolant and so much corrosion was able to accumulate in this one, because the top of the head bolt broke off. And he had some coolant entering the cylinder, it was coolant leaking on the outside, coolant in the valve train. And this one needed cams. This one was almost worst case scenario. Luckily the pistons and everything were fine, and as you can see they cleaned up nice and pretty, but no valve train issues as far as valve hitting a piston, but the cams were toast. So this guy got pretty lucky, and it's just bad head bolts, bad cams, bad everything. Alright, so we'll just take another peek in here and see how we're looking. Looking good there. This is the one that had a little bit in the bottom. Looks like I need to hit that with a little bit more air, but the longer that brake clean soaks in there the better. And all the other ones are looking good. But once again, you want to double check, because if I would have left that puddle in there, who knows what would have happened when I went to torque that bolt down. So always check with a camera to see if there's any kind of liquid laying down there in the bottom, just like that one there. So I think what I'll do is, since it's not coming out with air, I'll go grab my fluid extractor, suck it dry, and then I'll blow it out with air to dry it off completely, and we'll move on to the other side. All right, let's check, hopefully for the last time, to see how we're looking. And there's still some carbon in there, still in the threads. That must have been one of the holes where the head stud broke. So I think what I'm going to do for right now is let some cleaner just soak in this one to loosen that up while we move on to the other side. The little black on the bottom doesn't really concern me, but you can see right there on the bottom of my screen there is some buildup on the threads there, and I do not want that to affect our torque. So I'll let some solvent soak in that, and then we'll just go ahead and move on to the other side. Alright, let's see how we're looking. Got a little bit of carbon at the bottom of there, not too bad. I think I'll try and clean that one up just a little bit more. But the rest of them are looking pretty good. No buildup in there. Head bolt went down in there really smooth by hand. I don't think we need to worry about that too much. And it's mostly because I want to make sure the initial torque setting before we do the 90 degrees really seats down evenly and make sure it's all accurate. But all these holes are looking real good except for that top left one. and then I have a plan for that one as well. So what I wanted to do is get a straight long pick tool on that one that's over there and kind of break loose that carbon that's sitting at the bottom. And I think I'll do the same thing for this one right here that is kind of caked up at the bottom as well. But all the other ones are looking really good. And if you guys were enjoying the fancy camera work that our new helper was doing, that's just too bad, because his fancy little gimbal thing he was using and brought with him broke the first time we used it.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
So there goes that. Yeah, I was hoping we could do something a little different with the video. Maybe we'll get another one, but it just wasn't working out. I think the camera's just a little too heavy for that thing, so we'll have to get a real one. But moving it over here, I'm gonna get my pick tool in here and loosen that stuff up. All right, so I've had that brake clean sitting in this one for a while. So it's just softened it up pretty good. I'm just gonna break that loose down in there. Remember, it doesn't really have to be absolutely perfect. I'm probably going way overboard just doing this. But why have an engine on the stand and not want it to be absolutely perfect? So... and then we'll suck everything out. And if you don't have one of these and you work on cars fairly often, I highly recommend it. They have a hand pump one, but I like the one that just runs off an air compressor. And this thing sucks. And in a good way. Use it almost every day. I love it. It's one of my favorite tools. It's like my third or fourth one. They last about a year or so of daily use. We do brake flushes, everything else with them. Definitely worth the money. Okay, so not 100% spotless, but there's no big chunks down in there. We're gonna call that one good. I'll see if I can snake the camera in on the other one. So I gotta move the other camera. And no more big chunks down the bottom of that one either. So we're gonna go ahead and put these heads on, get the head bolts on. That'll be it. Very important. When you put the head gaskets on here, first you put a thin layer of silicone right around here. Make sure you go down over top of the timing cover where it splits too. And I've had multiple people call in asking for help when they do cylinder heads on these themselves because they end up having coolant end up in their oil. And I asked, well, did you silicone where the cylinder head goes over the timing cover here? Because this is a very large coolant port, and if for whatever reason the head gasket doesn't seal right here, it's going to pour right down into there and fill up your timing cover full of coolant, mixed with the oil, all that nasty stuff. And of course the answer is always no. They did not remember the silicone. So very important to put that there. A little dab of do-ya. Then we have our OEM Mercedes head gasket that we're going to lay down here. They are side specific. I would give you the part number, but I already threw away the container because I didn't think I was going to be filming this. And we'll also put thin layer on top of this. You don't want to go crazy, just keep it nice and thin because the cylinder head is going to smoosh that down pretty good. All right, cylinder head time. Ooh. So we have our nice, clean, freshly surfaced cylinder head. It's a little tricky to get it on there by yourself, but really all you need to do is just be careful of the guide. Make sure you're not crushing the guide. And it'll sit on the dowels there while you go grab head bolts. And here are the head bolts. There's your part number, Erling, OEM manufacturer. And I'm just going to go ahead and start dropping these in all of the holes. And before I put this last one in here, so this is a new style old head bolt. Did not come from this engine. This is just another engine we took the head bolts out of. And here is a new head bolt. Now if I hold these up level, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but the used one is slightly longer than the new one. And that is because it is a stretch bolt. So whenever we do the 90-degree turns on these new bolts, it's physically stretching the bolt, and that's why you cannot reuse them. Because after they stretch so much, you risk breaking them. And they will lose their tensile strength, even just from stretching, and you will not have the correct amount of clamping force. Which is why some people just choose to use head studs, because they're reusable and they're stronger. But for OEM sakes, these head bolts work just fine. You just can't reuse them. So I'm gonna grab some torque specs for you guys and we'll start torquing these down. Okay, so before we get carried away, I'm just going to go ahead and just run these down so they are snug on there. Making sure they don't hit any snags, make sure they don't bind up or anything. Not putting any really pressure on them. Once I feel that they're touching the cylinder head, I stop, because the first torque spec's really low. It's like 7 foot-pounds or 7.5, something like that. The first torque spec doesn't really matter that much, but we're going to do it by the book just in case. And you want to look inside of there and make sure that the head bolt is physically touching the cylinder head, because once you go torquing, like let's just say one of the threads was messed up or we missed a piece of carbon in there, you don't want to be torquing against a restriction in the threads, because then your torque is wrong and your angle is going to be wrong. You want to make sure you're actually torquing against the cylinder head. I've had them before where, you know, all that carbon on the bottom is, or even, you know, coolant if you're not checking, and it's going to be a bad time. So before you start putting any kind of real torque, just make sure that the head of that bolt is physically touching the cylinder head. And you probably could run these down with like a really light electric screw gun or impact or something, and just be careful that you don't impact it to the cylinder head, but I don't like to risk it. And if you did it that way, you wouldn't really be able to feel the threads. So if there's any junk in the threads or it's sticking or anything, the impact is just going to run down through there. But so I like to do everything by hand. I also have the engine set at 40 degrees, like normal. Doesn't really matter right now because we don't have any cams in it, but just out of habit, anytime I'm working on one of these, I make sure I have the crank at 40 degrees. And it's just less work for me to do whenever I decide to put the cams in. I just know it's already there. Okay, so we have our torque spec and our torque sequence for the cylinder heads, and the very first step is 7.4 foot-pounds. So very low. Very rare that you're going to have a torque wrench that even goes that low. I know mine doesn't, but mine does have a digital display, so I'm just going to set it as low as it goes, which is 12.5 foot-pounds, and we're just going to watch the screen and stop it when it gets to 7. And if it goes to 12, it doesn't really matter because we're getting ready to go to a second stage anyway. This mainly just makes sure that the head is completely seated to the block, that way you're not stuck on a dowel or something like that, which we know we're not, so we don't have to worry about too much. But I am going to make sure we follow the torque sequence, which you'll see right here. So I'm going to leave that right here for me, and we will start putting these at 7.5 foot-pounds, or as close as I can possibly get, since my torque wrench doesn't go that low. So we'll start with number 1 here, and let's see where we got once we get a little bit of torque. Hopefully it'll read something on here before it decides to beep. It's so low, I don't think it can sense it. Nope, so that was 12. So we're just gonna do 12. It's not gonna hurt anything. Like I said, we're just seating the cylinder head. The biggest thing is that they are all the same tightness, and you go in the correct sequence. So we'll go on to number 2. Three. That's barely anything. I'm barely putting any pressure on this at all whatsoever. And just like any other torque sequence, you're really just moving in a circle. You're going in a circle. It's a circle. And you're just moving inside to out. If you were taking the cylinder head off, you would move from outside to in. Okay, and now we can go to our second stage. So you don't touch any of these outside bolts until you're done torquing the cylinder head. But our next step is 36.9 foot-pounds. Much more manageable, and really the reason why that, 7.5 doesn't really matter. So 36.9, and since I only have a chance of doing whole numbers, we'll do 37, and we'll just follow that torque sequence. Ring around the rosy. This torque spec, however, is very important because after this, we are going to be doing our 90-degree turns, so you definitely want all of these bolts to be the same tightness before you start doing that. Okay, so now comes the fun part. We have 3 90-degree turns. So things are about to get really tight. And yes, it does take all 3. Make sure you get all 3 full 90 degrees. You're stretching that bolt. It's not going to be easy, but it has to be done. It's still way easier than torquing the crank bolt. I think that's like 148 Newton meters and then a 180-degree turn. So yeah, good luck with that one. But head bolts, it's not that bad, but it is a little tricky with the engine on the stand because the stand's going to try and turn on me and all this and that. I'll probably have to get my helper because I'm not heavy enough to hold it still. I'm barely strong enough to turn the bolt. So, but what I like to do is before I torque any of them, what I'll do is get my paint marker here ready, and you'll see why. Because as we do 190, we're going to put a little mark. So we'll do 1 pass, and each one of these holes will have 1 mark. And when we're done, we will have 3 marks. You may have the attention span to not have to mark these. I sure don't, because I'll probably be interrupted about 50 times while I torque these, and I'm not going to remember where I left off. So since I have to be, I'm needed everywhere, I'm going to mark these in case I have to stop, come back, and I can just say, oh, I just did my 2nd stage on this one. Now I need to move to the next one, do a 2nd stage on that one. And I don't risk either letting a bolt too loose, or I don't risk turning one on 90 degree too far. Both would be bad. So make sure you track and mark each one how many 90 degrees you've done. So let's get our torque wrench set up for degrees right here. Works a lot better if I set it down on a level surface. There we go. So we have 90 degrees, and you just follow the same torque sequence as before and start doing 90s until you need a break, which is often for me because I'm just a little guy. So we'll do our first one here. And this torque wrench does make it easy. I can do it in multiple stages. I don't have to do like a full 190. I can do, break it up in different steps. So we will put 1 mark right there so that we know that we have been there. So I try to use a bright color so it's visible. And you don't have to worry about the paint coming off. I've done a bunch of these head bolts in cars we've done cams and everything in, and say a year or 2 later, their valve cover gasket's leaking, and take the valve cover off, and there's all my 3 marks. So if you ever see that, that's my call sign. You're doing valve cover gaskets on a car, that's how you know Rusty has been here. So put a mark on that one. This first 90 is pretty easy, but once you get to that 3rd stage, it's a workout. Okay, first pass is complete. Now we can start the torque sequence again, and we'll do another 90, but I gotta pee. This is exactly why I have to mark them, because I gotta stop to do something every time. BRB. Okay, so I just went and did 30 things and helped Joey and answered a million questions. Where were we again? Oh yeah, that's right. All of them were done because there's a mark on every one of them, and I can't mess it up. So we're gonna get to our 2nd stage of 90 degrees. Get my torque wrench fired back up. Get my torque sequence up here for my ADD ass. Follow it the whole time. I can't tell if it's ADD or dyslexia or whatever, if I'm literally need that to get me to remember the sequence every single time, but I don't take any chances. Right. Now is when it starts to get a little tighter. Get my 2nd little dot down here. And if you watch one of our videos with Alex from Legit Street Cars, whenever we were building his C63 here, the one that actually worked, you know, watch the video, there's some drama there. He was messing with me, and when we were done, he just went in here and marked a bunch of extra marks and wiped some off just to mess with me. I about had a stroke.
Hey, Rusty, do you remember if we did this one 3 times?
What's that?
Did we do that 3 times? We only got two marks, you sure?
Mm-hmm. Positive.
There's only 2.
I know. I watched you do it though. Did you wipe it off?
Yeah, I did. Should we leave that for the next guy?
No. But it was all good. They were all torqued correctly, thank goodness. Still waiting to get him back for that. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do yet, but it'll be good. Yeah. Right, now we can start speeding up a little bit. Oh, man, these are getting tight. All right, 3rd stage, here we go. And you will feel these start to get a little looser on that 3rd stage just because you are stretching that bolt. You will be able to feel it, or at least I feel it. They are tight. I really wish my little Harry Potter spell would have worked.
Wingardium Leviosa.
Maybe I need to hit my head a little bit harder next time or something. I don't know. You don't necessarily have to use a super fancy torque wrench like I am. You could definitely just hold a wrench and make sure it's at a 90. I think I've explained this a million times. There's apps on your phone. You can hold your phone with your wrench and it'll keep track of the torque with you. But I mean, I spent the money on this thing. I might as well use it. I might need someone's foot to come hold one of these still. Let me go grab Joseph. All right, Joey is here to stabilize the engine for me with these last few. All right, that's all there is for this side. There are 2 bolts here. I need to put in torque before I completely finish the cylinder head, but I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, get everything torqued, and that way I can go ahead and torque all 4 of the small timing cover bolts at the same time. So let's go ahead and go on to the other side. So let's put our thin layer of silicone on here, and make sure you're using quality silicone. We like the right stuff. Mercedes factory silicone, that's good, but don't buy like the cheap like $5 little tube from AutoZone or whatever. That stuff's junk. Make sure it's quality, especially on something that takes hours and hours to get to. You don't have to redo it just because you cheaped out on some silicone. So now we can get our head gasket on here. Make sure we don't get any oil or coolant on the gasket. We can get that guy right there. All right, let's get ready for cylinder head number 2. Get our silicone on top of the gasket as well. So get this on here like so. Set down on the dowels. All right, so now we can start dropping our new head bolts in here. I'm gonna start running a few of them down just so that head doesn't go anywhere. Now what's left is we need to put our timing cover bolts in here, which I will go grab. Not a huge deal if you don't do these right away. I also need to put the dowels back in here to hold the guides in place. Use with a slide hammer. They slide right in front of there. This is all we're going to do for today's video. Then next step would be put the tappets in for the cams, put the cams in, but make sure always that you put these bolts in here before you put your cams in, or at least the phasers, because you will not be able to get to those once the cam phasers are there. So wouldn't want to see you have to waste a set of cam bolts on that just because you forgot to get through those. So watch out for that. But I'd say this looks pretty good. Basically, the purpose of this video is to make sure that you knew the differences between the torque procedure of head bolts versus head studs. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. We got these heads on here. They are torqued to spec. Everything's nice and clean. It's ready to get the cams and tappets installed so we can get this engine back in this customer's vehicle. So if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe. And as always, leave a comment about the big red mark on my forehead that hopefully goes away in the comments. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace. All right, and while I have my magical concussion Harry Potter powers, I just want to try this. Might cut the video a little short, but it'll still be cool, so it's worth a shot. So make sure no one's around to get hurt. Reparo. That made it easier, but I guess it didn't work. But I had to try it. I'm trying to get a good place to stand. All right, just size myself up here for the outro. I think I'm gonna try to turn this way a little bit. Just trying to get in frame here. Testing, testing, testing.